Hello, welcome to Distinct Narrative Voices. I'm your moderator, Steve Savage. A shout out to Diana for helping us set this up and doing all her hard work. So first of all, I'd like to hear from our individual panelists, if you don't mind. So please chime on in, introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your work. Don't make me pick somebody. I work in education. I know how to do this.
I can go ahead and go.
Go ahead.
I'm Sophia Beaumont. You might know me from the Discord group as Not Magic. Also on Twitter under that name. I also write under the name Sheena Peril. As Sophia Beaumont, I write urban fantasy and kind of more comedic stuff. Still usually has a darker undertone, but it'll usually make you laugh through it. And then on my other pen name, I write Gothic, Victorian, paranormal, really darker stuff that borders on horror.
Thank you.
And I also help out sometimes with these panels and doing the behind the scenes stuff.
Thank you, Sophia. Who's our next panelist that wants to speak and put themselves on the spot?
I'm Lo Potter. I am an American Gothic short story author. I have a couple of novels in progress, and I am also a poet. I am not yet a member of the Discord, but should work on that. And my brain has just kind of blanked on what other information may be relevant.
Website so we can buy your books.
My poetry book is available on Amazon or through any of the small independent bookstore retailing websites. I do not sell an ebook on purpose, so please go through the small independent bookstore retail websites.
All right, thank you very much. Who's next out of our guests?
That would probably be me. I think I'm the last one.
Hey, KJ, how you doing?
Good. I'm KJ Herwick. I'm a fantasy and science fiction author. I like to basically mash them together with a little bit of revenge and sometimes romance. So my current book, Bloodflower, came out a few months ago, so you can pretty much find it at any retailer. And then I've got a short story prequel to Bloodflower that's coming out in an anthology in a couple weeks. So you also want to check out This Wicked Darkness. And you can find me at kjherwick.com or any social media at kjherwick.
Well, thank you. And I'm your host. I'm your host, Steve Savage. Diana, are you speaking?
Are you forgetting that I'm a panelist on this one? I am actually a panelist. I'm listed on the site and everything.
Oops, please go ahead, Diana.
So I am Diana Gunn. I am the organizer behind today's event, and I am also a fantasy writer. I write fantasy that borders on the line of horror and occasionally straight up horror, and very rarely recently space opera. And you can find me at authordianagunn.com. But what I'd rather you do today is to check out the Ko-fi link that I just posted for the Weeknight Writers membership program, and to consider supporting us for next year's events so that we can keep hosting these events and keep hosting them for free for the people that really need them the most.
All right, well, thank you very much. As noted before, I forgot Diana was on this since I'm used to her being omnipresent. I'm Steve Savage. I write about careers, creativity, and world building. And I have a fiction series in book 2, the Avanoth series. I just got book 2 out, which is described as a story of mystic destinies and questionable decisions. And Diana actually did such a good job beta reading, she got a credit as editor for that. So just a note. But I'm mostly known for my series Way with Worlds, which is a series, 18 books and counting, on world building advice, which is mostly me taking everything I hate about bad fiction and games and turning it into coaching exercise. So apparently I'm going to be writing this till I'm dead. But speaking about going forward, whether it kills us or not, our subject's distinct narrative voices, and we all know that's really important. And I write multi-perspective books. We all have our different twists. So I'd like just everyone here to take a moment to kick us off. How do you make your narrative voices stand out, especially when you have something a little unusual like multiple characters or something hard to relate to? And if everyone's too afraid, I, the major extrovert, will pick somebody. Don't make me do it.
I can't tell if you're being sarcastic or not about that major extrovert thing.
I don't know anymore, but Diana decided to speak up. So Diana, how do you get distinct narrative voices? How do you make them alive, unique?
So it really depends from project to project. In some voices, in some works, it just happens sort of automatically. So in my first book, Moonshadow's Guardian, the two perspectives, the big difference is that one has been sort of alive for a really long time, but like kind of in like a hell dimension and completely like has spent a lot of the time isolated from the world. And has sort of had a story of being trapped. The other one is a couple thousand years younger, which sort of lends itself to automatically being very different, but also much more tragic. And so those two voices were very much just inherently different because they were approaching the world from such different viewpoints.
Mhm.
In other projects where I have characters who are more similar, you know, say I have two women who are nearly the same age, all my viewpoint characters are women, and who come from the same culture, then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to really like flesh out like, what does this person see first when they walk into a room?
Mhm.
And that's sort of where I start.
All right, thank you, Diana. So who wants to go next? What's your way of doing multi-POV stories and giving those distinct voices?
I actually look at the history, not just of the character, but of the world, you know, that they grew up in. So in Bloodflower, I've got 3 POV characters. 2 of them are men that are soldiers, and they're sort of what would happen if you took the same person and gave them two sides of a tragic event. How would it change who they are and the choices that they make in life? So they become anti-heroes to one another. And one's borderline villainous, but you can kind of see where they are so similar in so many things they do. They've got the same career. They've got, you know, this, I think at one time they used to have some of the same values, but now one is twisted, one was loved by his family. And it's interesting to see how they make those different choices. And so you put that into the voice. What choice do they make? What are they wearing? Why are they wearing it? How do they treat their teams? You know, they're both, one's a captain, one's a commander, but how do they treat the people that are under them? What are their particular missions in life? And also, how do they speak? You know, so when you take all of those things and you start writing each character, you could put them on the same journey, but they're going to take it in completely different ways. You know, one of them might use the F word all the time. The other one might just not say much at all, you know, be very broody and very afraid to let his feelings out. So you really, just by little things like that, you can really put the voice in. And then I have a third character who did not grow up near them. She actually was born 4,000 years before them. She was kind of in a happy life, stumbled on something she shouldn't have seen, ended up tortured in a cage, and then eventually in hypersleep. So when she wakes up, she's looking for technology. She's looking for a starship. She's looking for a pilot. And she's on this moon that's been terraformed, and it's all very, almost like a medieval culture. You know, everybody rides horses, they've got swords, and she's like, what do I do? So her panic and her fear and her trying to understand this world lends itself to her own voice as she chooses her own words, how to speak, how her body functions, and sort of her history of what she grew up with and what she knows to be real and not real.
Thank you. So Sophia and Lo, who wants to go next?
So I guess one of the things that I mean, when I was thinking really hard about this panel, I tried to distill the way that I've thought about this while writing one of my works in progress is Southern Hospitality. And in that case, I'm writing from vastly different character perspectives. And part of that is a lot of it's based on intergenerational trauma, and how these characters are coming from extremely different backgrounds. And there's a biological component to that. I was talking to some friends about this last night and sort of in preparation for this. A piece of you was present in your grandparent. So when your grandparent was pregnant with who would eventually become your mother, that gamete that would eventually become you was also forming. And so it's really important to think about who your character's grandparents were, even if you never write that down in your novel. And how did your grandparents raise, or not your grandparents, but how did your character's grandparents raising their parents end up impacting your character? And that's going to change for every single character. And that's sort of a process that ends up building for every single character and creating this uniqueness. I like thinking about characters as unique as people because people are so complex. And part of this comes down to just very practical writing techniques to foster these individual voices. So like having characters write letters back and forth to each other that you never end up actually putting in the book, but just to practice that voice, it's you have a character write from their perspective to the other character, detailing their motivations in their own words to each other, arguing, or having them just complain or just, say, I disagree with you for these reasons. Even if those characters never meet, it helps to foster that voice and difference while thinking about all of these background things having to do with where those characters are coming from. In a way, you can think about it as who hurt you and who hurt the generations before you that you came from.
Well, thank you very much. Sophia, you want to take us home? What's your
Sure.
secret?
So I guess my story is a little bit unusual because I've only recently discovered that I don't picture things in my head the way other people do. When I see things, it's like looking through foggy glass. Like I don't get a clear image of people's faces or anything like that. So their voices and the way that they speak are very important to me. Like if I met you once on the street and then you changed your hair and I saw you again the next day, I probably wouldn't recognize you, but I might recognize your voice. So that's like a weird quirk with me. And one of the reasons I started writing multi-POV with the AJ Marshall series, the first book came out in April, is because AJ, the main character, is visually impaired. She has congenital bilateral nystagmus, which means that she has involuntary eye movement, and that messes with her depth perception. It messes with her ability to see detail. It impacts a couple of other things. So when she's narrating, she is literally not seeing things that other people would. And because I was writing a mystery series, I really needed someone with her who could then fill in the blanks for the reader. So I created these two characters. One of them's a ghost, one of them is her rival. And so the two of them kind of fill things in. And the ghost is the spirit of a Black man. So he notices very specific things. This book is set in the 1920s. He's had a very distinctive upbringing that's drastically different from the main character and her rival. Meanwhile, her rival is an extremely privileged white man. So he notices completely different things. And so the three of them all speak in very different ways. AJ and her rival, because they're both writers, they both work for newspapers, they tend to have a little bit more highbrow way of speaking than this other man who was trying to be a writer, but he was mostly self-educated. He was working in bars. and he picked up the street slang of 1920s New York. While the two of them, AJ doesn't really use slang. She's much more literary and precise in the way that she speaks. Well, Jasper, her rival, uses a lot of slang. He's very flirty. So all of that kind of goes into their voices. It's where they're from. What kind of things did they hear when they were growing up? Who are they around that they're absorbing that information? And then what are their goals? And how does the way that they speak interact with that?
Thank you. For myself, my last novels, I kind of have a philosophy on this, that there's sort of levels what make the characters distinct. You have to know your world because that's where your characters are. And each character says something about the world, how they're influenced. You also want to think about their background, what made them the way they are. And then you want to think about the very distinct habits. Like, I like to think about how the characters get very specific on certain things. Like in my novels, Marigold Reldomau, a highly anal retentive sorceress, tends not to use contractions. If she can't say it in 2 words, she won't say it in 1. But her business partner, Scintilla, uses short bursts of speech, little bits of communication. She also comes from a military reserve background. And that's interesting to do that. You look at these different scales of characters. And finally, you should ask how the character subverts setting expectations. They're not just results of cause and effect. They're independent people. What makes them a little different in their setting that takes them beyond the world, beyond their upbringing to be a unique person? And like Lo said, you want to think these things over and write letters because they'll burrow into your unconscious. The more you think about them, the more it comes out in your writing without you having to think about it. You start finding all these things. And a weird example would be in my Avanoth series, the 2 characters I mentioned, Marigold and Scintilla, they have this kind of sisterly best friends relationship that sometimes gets mistaken for being a couple, and they have to keep telling people you're wrong. But it's a running joke. But something that I realized later is Marigold was the oldest child in her family and Scintilla was the youngest. And their relationship is actually reflecting family dynamics I plotted out in detail I thought would never be used. Which is interesting because Scintilla sometimes thinks Marigold is an anal retentive dumbass headed towards self-destruction, and she's kind of right. But knowing those things burrows into your head and then comes out. You may not think you're using them, but you will. And the final thing in multi-POV and distinct voices, everyone's the hero of their own story. So when you write, everyone is an unreliable narrator. And if you do that right, people will be not only emotionally invested, the contrasts are going to make them go on more and more to find out who's right. And the real fun is proving to them that everybody in your story is absolutely wrong. Around about that time, everyone starts crying. So that's our initial introduction. So I would like to see, do you mind, team, if we opened it up to characters? Or to questions?
Yeah.
Clearly I need more caffeine. But before I go quietly get my maple spiced iced coffee, thank you, Trader Joe's. Who from our audience has his questions? Just verbalize it. What do you want to share? What do you want to ask us about our specific subject? Come on, don't be bashful, unmute yourself and let's see what you want to learn.
People are not allowed to unmute themselves. People can ask questions in the chat.
Okay,
You did
sorry
not
about
read
that.
the email I sent you.
I see
I ran-
2 messages in chat.
Yeah, let's check. I also just ran another class earlier this week. So, all right. So if anyone would like to type things, unlike my last seminar several days ago where I had open questions, who would like to ask a question of our team? Okay, do we follow a pattern, alternating POV or random? If no one would mind, I'd like to take Dario's question first because I think about this a lot.
Mhm.
I initially like to follow a Vega pattern to make sure everyone got enough narrative space, but then I realized what POV tells the story the best. And you should try to shake it up, but sometimes you have to ask, who will tell the story the best. Sometimes that means they will inform the reader and give them the best viewpoint. Sometimes you pick the person that will mislead the reader so they get surprised later. But I ask myself, I try to alternate, but I ask, what is the best voice for this story at this time? And Sophia, Lo, KJ, Diana, who would like to take their answer there?
So I usually start out, I'm definitely a plotter. I have to outline everything. So I will make a list of who I want my narrators for that book to be. And I usually start out with like, okay, I know AJ's the main character. I want to start with her point of view. And then I also like to do chapter cliffhangers. So rather than like ending the chapter at the end of a scene, I will create a cliffhanger and then continue it into the next one. So the person keeps reading because I like to torment my readers. So I'll be like, okay, I'm starting out with AJ on this, and then I get to where her chapter is going to end. And then one of the reasons why that particular series is written in multi-POV is because there's a bunch of disparate aspects that come together to reveal the solution to the mystery. So I'll skip over to somebody else who is investigating something else that doesn't seem related at all, and then pull them in and then go to the next person. So I start out thinking, it's going to be, it's going to be AJ, and then it's going to be the captain, and then Jasper is going to jump in, and then I'm going to do this person. And then the next round, I'll be like, okay, I can't have this person and this person right after each other because they're in the same area. So they're basically seeing and experiencing very similar things. So I'll throw somebody else in the mix, and it follows a general pattern, but it's not precise. It doesn't repeat exactly every single time.
Thank you there. Lo, Diana, KJ?
I'm actually going to talk about two authors who are not present, who I think do this really well. So Alyssa Marie Bethencourt, so she has 2 books out right now called Mornovan and Drahelon. And this is high fantasy. She follows the emotional intensity when switching between points of view. And this is pretty brilliant in the way that she does this, because you end up concealing information by following whichever character is emotionally reacting the strongest. And the way that she does it is just so brilliant. In Mornovan, all of the elves are just like, they're stone-faced, but in like their internal dialogue and internal emotions are just the most unstable thing you've ever seen. And so you have like flipping back and forth between humans, which are relatively like, okay, they're kind of stable, they have intense emotions, but then you have elves who are just losing their ever-loving minds all the time, every time something actually upsets them. And so you follow an elf as they leave the room to try and self-regulate and deal with whatever event has happened that has finally set them off. And that means that they're leaving the room and you're losing information on whatever is actually happening. And this is brilliant. And that is a technique that she uses. Another author that uses an interesting multiple point of view technique is Brian P. White in his post-apocalyptic zombie series, which is slipping my mind right now in terms of Death Doll. That's what it's called, the Death Doll. So his method for switching between points of view is a little difficult to describe, but he also uses it to conceal just enough information so that the reader is having to piece together bits of a mystery and is left to make conclusions for themselves. And I really like the way these 2 authors, instead of following a necessary pattern, instead use it as a way to lead the reader on for gathering information on their own.
Thank you. I'm actually taking notes in that, and now I have a new term, disaster elf, I think needs to go into our vocabulary. All right, Diana or KJ, what's your take on this?
I can go next. So one of the things that I write science fiction and fantasy, and I write romance, and I've noticed that depending on which genre you're writing in, the POVs as far as, equal property or just random really is genre defect, or it depends on the genre. So in romance, a lot of times there's two POVs. There's both love interests, and by the end they're going to have a happy for now or a happily ever after. But you get to see the story equally through both of them, or you only get to see it through one of them and hope that the other one's on the level. With fantasy and science fiction, it's a little bit more scattered. And instead of focusing those POVs around the love interest or the love affair itself, I've found that a lot of times writers they have this core plot, and then they're taking you on a journey, so sometimes you could have the main character for 3 or 4 chapters, and then all of a sudden it jumps to another person, and then nobody gets equal time, because it's actually each character is stepping forward independently. And so readers sort of have to navigate and go from the beginning to the end of the story. W. Michael Gear I'm reading his Donovan series right now, and it's exceptional. And the way that he does it is every story starts with a character that's not the main character, but they are the main character, or they're an important character for that particular story in the series. So it's really interesting. He doesn't stick to the novel, main character is always first. It's whoever's kind of important introduces new character, and then you find your familiar characters kind of coming back in. So I say whatever works for the story. If it's random, if you need equal time, what's going to make the most sense to the reader?
All right, Diana?
I think that, so mine is a little bit different, because most of my stories, the 2 POV characters or 3 POV characters, they tend to have very disparate storylines until near the end of the book, when they sort of converge. And so they're less dependent on each other's storyline in terms of when they happen. In Moonshadow's Guardian, I originally had it so that there was a POV chapter in the villain's point of view every 5 chapters, but I ended up having to split some chapters, so it became more random than that. And I haven't really systematically thought it out in other projects. It's just sort of been however it evolved. I just do what the story requires, honestly.
All right, thank you, everybody. Our next question, I will throw out to everyone, even though I want to take it right now. How far would you take the world building to help with creating the narrative voice/character? Go ahead, KJ. I know you're going to do it.
It's like my reputation precedes me here.
I get it. Same.
Okay, world building is one of my favorite things. Before I ever wrote Bloodflower, I was actually building the universe that it lives in. And there's something magical about pulling those planets and star systems and the laws of physics and animals and cultures all together, and then going, well, what happens if I throw a character in there? How do they react? Anyway, with world building, one of the things that I'm still learning is that it's not just setting, and because I've always kind of leaned pretty hard into the setting. But it's also, what's the political machinations, what's the character's goal as defined by their history, but also as defined by how they want to move forward, and then how they actually move forward, which is often 2 different paths. So world building is anything you can bring in that benefits the character, benefits the reader, but also really helps understand this world that the character lives in. Not just that they're standing by a tree or, overlooking a cliff, but maybe there's somebody behind her holding a knife. We need to know the reason why. All of that goes into this world that is surrounding that character. So the biggest thing I would say is bring as much as you can in, and then if you have to scale it back a little bit, you can do that, because the hardest thing is not bringing any of the world building in, or just doing it sparsely, and then you kind of feel like you're racing through the story. So
Thank you.
Uh,
Go
I
ahead.
think the part that I would want to respond to this is actually with a question, which is, who says I'm doing the world building for the characters?
That
If I could, Diana,
Yeah.
I have a saying where I said that your real character is the world, because there's this huge whirling thing behind your characters, and that's where they come from. But you really can't just talk about the world. So the characters, no matter how they're conceived, eventually become lenses on a much bigger picture. It's layers. So I always remember that, because even if the characters are spawned independently, they become part of something. So I view it as you have this whirling, churling world, and then you have these individual people that tell their own unique stories, and it should connect to the world and vice versa. I love to have little details, like in the Avanoth setting, I write, there are 2 forms of pizza, and people will argue over it for no good reason. But that's
Like pineapple.
thank you. Pineapple does not exist on pizza.
the 2. Okay,
You will.
we are not getting into the pineapple debate. No, bad authors, bad authors.
I will
Bad.
settle this.
No. Okay, I need to apologize for all of you for this. I'm sorry I brought it up, but you can see what inspired it. But very seriously, though, it's funny because the 2 forms of pizza are sauteed greens and onions in hummus baked on bread, and the later one, which is like having Korean banchan dumped on pastry. But this comment about what people prefer actually says a lot about the settings the characters come from. And this is why I always emphasize the world building, that by doing it, it works your way unconsciously in. But also, character POVs are great ways to let people in on the stuff folks need to know about the setting. So it should inform your writing, but also the right character POV can let out just that little secret that gives enough away, or switch to another character to conceal it until you horrify your audience with the truth. So I always advise us thinking of your world as very much its own thing and independent. Your characters are too, but you figure out how they hook up, and those stories where the character tells you about the world and the world informs the character, that just draws the reader in. And it also will spawn ideas when you're thinking about your character in context, about all these things that define them. And that way you can be in an important conference across the country and still argue about freaking pineapple.
Well, jumping back to that,
We're not going to
No,
pineapple.
no. I'm using this actually to talk about world building, promise.
Anchovies.
So I like anchovies. Anyways, so so your character lives in a world where they don't like pineapple, but the pizza place always gets it wrong and sends them a pizza with pineapple on it. So anyways, with world building, I've often thought of it as it is the place where you get to build your world of make-believe to play around, and that's where you get to meet the characters. Like when you are building something, that's where you are playing around in your own head, and you are building this from the ground up. And then the characters come out and say hello. And so it's something where eventually the 2 merge and it becomes a synergy, but world building is where everything always starts. A good example of this, so I wrote a book back in the early 2010s. It's been permanently shelved unless I rewrite it from scratch. But I mean, this was understand, no one trusts robots. They steal your information. No one trusts aliens. They just want to take your information back to their home world. zombies eating books. Actually, there's another author who did that way better than I ever did. I'm trying to remember her name. I retweeted her a while back. There, no one likes tamaracks because they vandalize your neighborhood and you see the trees like dropping spray paint cans. Bizarro book, but building that world and playing around in it in my head as a way to vent frustration at what was going on in the US. That was really therapeutic for me to build that world. And then characters started emerging. And that was how the writing started.
I just real quick, my current techno fantasy setting is actually a repurposed realistic post-apocalyptic setting for our world that was both interesting and depressing, but I recycled it. And there's actually a whole lot in there that's very personal and painful, but I enjoy the horror that it's 250 years after the big disaster. So some of these characters are very casual about the horror that their ancestors went through because they have enough emotional distance. And but the readers can pick up on it. That was awesome. Sophia, do you have anything to add to this? I don't think we got to you yet on world building.
Speak. Apparently, I've been voted off the island.
Okay,
because of my pineapple opinions.
the POV is now on you. You are now the main character. Give us an internal monologue, possibly involving Jason Momoa. I'm not sure.
So, like I said earlier, I don't visualize things very well. I rely a lot on dialogue. And for this reason, I don't usually build worlds from scratch. Like I've tried to write high fantasy. I just can't do it. I can't build that complex of a world from the ground up. So aside from my urban fantasy books, you're mostly going to see what I would consider alt history. Some version of it's the real world. You'll hear famous names, you'll see famous landmarks in it, but it's got a twist, like AJ's books. First book in the series, Magic in the Headlines, takes place in 1920s Chicago. There's gangsters, there's bootleggers, there's talk about suffrage, and the main character has asthma. And I actually, her medication is based on actual medications at the time. So it has cocaine in it. So, I pull in all of these historical things. I do a lot of research, but there's also magic. And Jasper has a wand and casts spells on people. And there's ghosts running around. And actually, one of the most fun examples of this that I did was, it's called All for One. It is an alternate retelling of The Three Musketeers with an all-female cast. And for that one, it's set in the 1860s, but I had to go back to the 1780s and the French Revolution in order to pull in the history. So I had to pick the point in my timeline where the story timeline split off from actual history and then extrapolate, okay, what is different about this world? Because in this world, Marie Antoinette and her children escaped France and were not beheaded. And they were taken to Quebec, which was a French territory. And they had had a lot of wars and revolutions. And they were just like, we just need a figurehead. We just need something that we can rally behind that will give us stability. So her children ended up ruling. And now it's become a tradition that the line is matrilineal. So the daughters inherit the crown. And that has led to some real severe changes. So in this version of Quebec, women can vote, women can have any job that they want. They have health care, there's daycare centers for their children. And it's all because that rulership change. And there's a conversation that they have with an American, and he's just like, yeah, we had to change our laws about voting because all the women were coming up here and we couldn't keep them in the US anymore. We need women to have babies. And like every single woman in the room just turns to him. That point where you diverge.
I have to say, as a guy that writes on world building, that is like Sophia, honestly, that is commitment to your craft and extrapolation. And I think that is not only fantastic. I live near Netflix. Let me go see if they're busy.
Yes.
I understand also they have a spare corgi lying around thanks to Cowboy Bebop. So can you work a corgi into your version?
I can definitely do that. I love dogs.
So that great answers for everyone. And let me just check our time here. We've got about 18 more minutes. I know we go on long, but such great information. So the next question is, do you typically have a main character and a multiple first person POV, or do you have all POV characters equal importance in time?
I'll start this one.
Diana has opinions. Go for it.
I have a book with multiple first person POVs, which I don't know if anyone else here does because it's not a super common thing to do.
I do it.
Actually, my first book, Moonshadow's Guardian, the one that I was talking about earlier, the two characters, they are both their POVs are both written in first person. And like I said, so their storylines are very separate until near the end. And the storyline is mostly just sort of biding their time, basically. So that has fewer chapters because there are fewer dramatic notes. And it's based on the drama, it's based on the interconnectedness. And I feel like really in most stories, there are very few stories where there are multiple POV characters, but they are all actually main characters. In most stories, you will find that there is a main character, even if the difference is very slight. So in my book, the villain has a POV chapter every 5 or 6 chapters. You might have a POV character who shows up every other chapter, but that doesn't necessarily make them the main character. Mm-hmm. The main character is the one who goes through the most dramatic character arc and who has the most to lose in the story. And that's usually one specific person.
For me, I've really fallen in love with the idea of rotating POVs, but I do like to have like a starter character. So that depends on what you're doing. I think it sort of depends. If you have multiple arcs, you may pick the best person to lead off. And the other thing that I do in my novel series that I may continue is, and I took a page from Skyrim. Skyrim, the games or the Elder Scrolls game series, you always start off as a prisoner. And they have a tradition with the current cast is it will always start off with the two main characters of Marigold and Scintilla getting in a stupid fight or being chased by someone for something they did off screen. And that's a fun way to do it. Is you might not have a POV, but for certain novels or stories, you might have a way to always introduce your multi-POVs. But I think it does depend a lot on what you need. Like if you have a very serious emotional arc, that's your main character. If there's severals, you may be switching it up. That I think depends. But we got Sophia Lowe and KJ here, and we've got 15 minutes left. What do you folks think about this? Main character and multiple first-person POV, give them equal time. What do you do?
I'll be quick. I usually have that main character, that starter character, just because I'm a very linear person, and having multiple first person protagonists that are main characters, that just makes my head explode. I can't follow all those different trains at the same time. So I usually have the one character who leads through, and they're kind of the sun at the center of the universe, and then everyone just kind of rotates around them, and they all do important things. They all have backstory and contribute to the plot, but it's all about that central character.
KJ and Lowe?
So in one of my current works in progress, Theorem Incomplete, there are multiple first person points of view because each of these characters are being interrogated, and they are then having to do flashbacks and figure out what pieces of information they are sharing, both to decide what of their experience was in fact valid versus what was a distorted version of reality, depending on the character, or were their motivations correct, or were they in fact just acting straightforward. The flashbacks versus what they're saying in their interrogation is highly dependent on the individual presentation from that first person point of view. So it is actually really important to try and divide it equally. Whereas with Southern Hospitality, I've had to try and divide it into 4 books because the leader character is the oldest. And then as the characters age to that same age range, then that person becomes the lead character.
Interesting idea. Anything else? Because I think we have currently played our questions out. So
I actually wrote down some recommended techniques for if people wanted some ideas on like just getting through writer's block or helping sort of in the background for developing unique individual character points of view.
you could actually maybe put that in the channel so people
Absolutely.
always have handouts, quick bit of advice. So as we've got 12 minutes left, I would like to actually kind of circle between everyone to see if there's a remaining piece of advice or interesting thing you'd like to share, especially unique to you. So please go for it. All those things you've been repressing, hoping someone would ask about. Now's the time to share it.
You asked and now my mind has gone blank.
Okay, so how do you deal with your mind going blank during a presentation? Diana, no.
Very poorly.
Okay. I actually have pre-made patter because I speak a lot. Excuse me there. So then let me ask one. What is the, what would you say in writing multi-POV stuff is the thing that surprised you the most about writing it? Sophia, does your brain come back online now?
Mostly I just get surprised by how much some of the side characters talk at me. You'll know what I mean. You've got characters going like this in your head 24/7, you know. And some of them that I thought would just be like a one-off chapter just to kind of set the scene end up carrying through. And I had one character in the first HA book. First one is Magic in the Headlines. It is out now. Magic in the Jazz Age comes out next spring. But Captain Fiona she's a skyship captain. She runs pirates, you know, she's that stereotypical steampunk character at the beginning of the book. And it starts out where she has just busted her brother out of an asylum in England, and she's on the run, and she doesn't want to speak to her family because they put him there. And she's very angry. She has this affectation of speaking like a pirate. She's actually Australian, but she speaks in that sort of like pseudo Cockney Liverpool pirate slang type thing. And then as you get to know her more and more, and as she becomes more comfortable with the main character, who's an outsider in her bubble, she starts to like calm down a little bit and she lets her natural accent come through. And then in the second book, you end up meeting her mother and her grandfather. And she just like really calms down and she starts giving people compliments and like trying to comfort her crew when they're upset about something, because now that she's in this space and she knows she's safe, she's allowing herself to be more natural and kinder and everything. And my editor of the first book was like, I really hate this character. I want to push her off the airship. But now she's a lot nicer and kinder, and we're starting to get into her redemption arc more, because she was a bit of a bitch at the beginning, I'm going to be honest.
Thank you.
But just seeing how those characters change.
Lo or KJ, do you have anything to add?
Oh, KJ,
No,
you
go
go
ahead.
first. Oh, okay.
What's your surprise? Hit us with a surprise.
I think the thing that has hit me the hardest has been villains don't know they're villains. The more that I've written, particularly the multiple POV, including villains that really don't know they're villains, especially when you have multiple villains and a single protagonist, and you have the majority of the book written from the perspective of those villains, they don't know they're villains. And I mean, you end up seeing just how human these people are in like, and it is so I'm struggling with words right now in the moment, but I mean,
no, it's not fine. I'm in the middle of a fucking call.
Please continue.
oh, okay. Villains don't know they're villains when you're writing them, if you are writing them in a way that someone will end up empathizing with them. And it is dangerous in some ways to write them like that, because having a reader cry over what a villain is saying because they're empathizing with them is potentially scary.
Understood.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, this is not intentional, but I keep writing Nazis as my bad guys. Wonder why.
Agreed.
I mean, this is not intentional, and I write a lot of different time periods. They're not like Heil Hitler, swastika wearing Nazis, but they're people who embody those ideals. And in the book I'm working on right now, Captain Fiona gets a redemption arc. Jasper doesn't. Spoiler alert. But and so he's starting to like drink the Kool-Aid and be like, hey, what these people are saying makes a lot of sense. And he's starting to empathize with them more. And it's not occurring to him that these ideas are harmful to the people he's directly involved with, specifically AJ. So I don't want to make them, I'm blanking on the word now. I don't want people to have sympathy for them or empathy.
That,
But,
exactly.
but you have to make it believable that they believe they are the heroes in this situation, even though they are responsible for thousands of deaths.
Thank you. This is what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Like writing the first person point of view, especially when you have these villains, like it is dangerous.
Yeah. And just to clarify, Nazis, bad.
Yes.
When you're done here, go punch a Nazi.
Bingo.
That would
I-
require leaving my house. Otherwise, I might.
This is true.
For me, the surprise that I found was I want to address two things. One, writing villains, I think it can be done if you can give someone the gut-shifting horror of realizing they liked a bad guy. If you can hurt your reader in a good way. But a big theme of my last novel was that there's, outside of our quote-unquote heroes, there are 3 different factions, they don't know, technically 4. And 2 of them are real assholes, and they're both convinced they're right. And when you discover how awful they are, it actually hurts, because you're like, well, you're a ditz and you're a guy afraid he's too old. And later it's like, oh no, you're terrible people. That really like hurts when the characters realize it, but I didn't have to go to first person. But I think a thing that surprised me from multi-POVs, my last novel, when I decided to really treat it as 4 protagonists, is one of the character, Reverend Beacon, is the team nice guy, which helps because everyone else has the social skills of a kick in the crotch, though they don't know it. They both have their own ways of being, all 3 have their own ways of being unsubtle, but this guy is a seething ball of rage and too much responsibility. And in fact, Diana's edits helped because it ramped up all the scenes where he is angry, pissed off, tired of everybody's shit, annoyed at his own goddess. I mean, it's like, I'm like, my dude, you've been repressing this since before I wrote you. And it all culminates in, he has a divine gift that he normally can't be hurt by an attack. His goddess, the goddess of fortune, just lets him step out of the way. But when he punches someone in the face out of rage, he breaks his hands because it doesn't work that way. So literally he hurts himself for the first time in 14 years because he hauls off clock someone and does it so poorly he breaks his fingers. And that was an amazing thing to write. And by having multiple POVs, everyone gets to see everyone different, and then you see them different. And at least give it a try, because when you do the real shifting POVs, you will learn things about your characters that will amaze you.
Yeah.
And
Even even if you don't necessarily keep the POV,
yes,
like
yes,
in
Yeah.
Moonshadow's Champion, the second Moonshadow book, I originally had 3 POV characters and then I scrapped one of them. But I still learned so much by writing that character's perspective for a few scenes that I'm actually working on a different book where she is
Yeah.
a POV character in that book, and she's foundational for that book. And I mean, it's frustrating to write like 5,000 or more words and then have to just like completely cut that out of your novel, but you always learn something.
Mhm. And we have to go soon, KJ. I know you got a little interrupted there. It does happen. Anything you want to share on surprises in POV writing?
Yeah, I am always
Like 3
surprised.
minutes.
Sorry, I'm always surprised at how characters justify their actions. They can make a decision and whether it's good or bad. Sometimes the justification, even when it's a good decision, you're like, really? You're
Yeah.
doing that? So I'm always surprised by that. And also how readers react to characters,
I get that. Well, we have to close up, everyone. I hope this has been helpful for everyone. Such a great group of people to speak. I appreciate working with all of you. The posts, obviously, in the chat channels, you can see both some of our links, and in the Discord as well. So this will be posted online, and I'm sure we'll all see you again sometime soon.
Thank you guys for
Thank you.
Take
stopping
care.
by.
Thank you so much.
See you all later.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Thank
care.
you.
This video was recorded at the event Storycrafting Sessions Character Development, hosted by the Weeknight Writers Group in partnership with Renaissance Press. To learn more about this and other events hosted by the Weeknight Writers Group, check out businessforauthors.com/weeknight-writers.